Hello, everybody. Welcome to the special business meeting for the District of Squamish for Tuesday, October 28th. Holland Squallen, Clis Suktima, ta Squamish Okmeo. As always, we're gathered to do our work today on the traditional and unceded territory of the Squamish Nation. Please be advised that the council meeting is being live streamed, recorded, and will be available to the public to view on the District of Squamish website following the meeting. If you have concerns, please notify corporate officer present at the meeting. Can I have someone move adoption of the agenda? Moved by Councillor French, second by Councillor Hamilton. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much. I just wanted to let everyone know that we've got Councillor Stoner joining remotely, and I believe Councillor Pettingill is on his way in if he's not here already. So we'll keep an eye out for him. So our first order of business is discussion of the 2026 to 2035 Utilities Fund operating. So I will turn over to staff to run us through the presentation.
Thank you, Mayor. Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. My name is Heather Boxer, General Manager of Financial IT and Procurement Services. My pronouns are she, her. I am joined today by Laura Turner, Director of Financial Planning and Reporting. We do have a few of our budget managers joining us today, one in person and possibly one or two online. However, many of the subject matter experts are unable to attend today's meeting as they are being redeployed to manage critical services as a result of job action underway. We will do our best to support Council today, but we do ask for your support and patience as we try to manage in their absences while providing you the necessary information you need to move the utility budget forward. So in terms of agenda, we will be providing a quick review of the financial plan timeline and guiding principles. I will then cover the challenges and key efforts to minimize costs associated with the three utility funds. I will then review some elements of the 10-year plan for Council and the community, and to be thinking about as we move through the various utility fund financial plans. I will then pass it over to Ms. Turner, who will walk you through the utility fund summaries, including each fund's revenue, rate increase proposals, and service level change requests. So each year we do work towards adoption of the budget in December to enable staff to begin work on their projects and programs right away in January of the following year. Due to the ongoing job action, many elements of the financial planning process are being delayed until further notice. However, the water, wastewater, and solid waste rates must be established and the fees and charges bylaw updated prior to January 1st. So we are here today with three readings of the utility fund operating budgets. The capital plan and special operating projects associated with the utility funds will be presented for Council deliberation at the special operating and capital budget, which is a date is due to be determined. The utility funds, along with the general funds capital and special operating projects, are posted on Let's Talk Squamish, including a report to Council. The focus of today's meeting will be on the utility operating budget, service level changes, and rates. So this slide provides a snapshot of several engagement opportunities and public information and input tools available, including Let's Talk Squamish, which is the hub for public information, and the district's online budget tool, which is Budget Book. As noted in the previous slide, the budget information night will be rescheduled. The district conducts its financial planning process as outlined in the long-term financial plan guiding principles and financial plan policy, which has four principal categories that were developed to guide management and Council in the financial planning process. The guiding principle categories are stable and sufficient, sustainable and equitable, prudent and flexible, efficient and measurable. So as noted in the general fund workshop on October 7th, municipalities across BC and the country are facing a number of financial challenges and cost pressures that are incorporated into this 26 to 2035 financial plan. Inflation and supply chain continue to be a challenge, increasing cost pressures on the utility rate revenue required to operate and maintain consistent municipal service of the utility. Rising costs of capital put pressure on asset management funding strategies and diminish the value of reserves requiring additional revenue to keep pace with aging infrastructure. BC municipalities are facing substantial financial investment needs to replace aging infrastructure after decades of insufficient investment and reserve savings. In addition to aging infrastructure, the district is a growing community and requires additional investment to expand infrastructure and operations to keep pace as demand for services increases. Cost of labor contracts have risen significantly over the years. The 2026 to 2035 financial plan has taken a thoughtful and measured approach to addressing these challenges and cost pressures. Some highlights of efforts include continuing to limit service level changes to high priority and pre-committed changes only. This is after several years of minimal investment due to the focus on labor contract negotiations, cost increases, and pandemic and post-pandemic limitations. Staff continue to review operating costs and reduce or reallocate where savings have been identified in an effort to absorb increases wherever possible. Staff maximize funding opportunities, leveraging external funding sources and utilizing provisions to smooth out costs year to year. I introduced the next 2 slides in the general fund operating workshop on October 7th as well, so will be a repeat for some who viewed that workshop. However, it is an important piece of the utilities fund discussion as well. So the district has drafted a 10-year financial plan. This is a significant milestone for the district as we look beyond 5 years. Under the community charter, local governments are required to adopt a financial plan for 5 years. However, the Government Finance Officers Association recommends a long-term financial plan to project revenues, expenses, financial position beyond just 5 years. And we are proud to say that the district is one of a very few early adopters of the 10-year plan in BC. A 10-year plan addresses both the short-term needs and long-term financial sustainability of the district, incorporates master plans, and aids in the prioritization of capital requirements. A 10-year plan also ensures the district is building adequate reserves to support the district's capital program long-term, decreases the reliance on borrowing where possible, and makes utility rates predictable so we can anticipate and mitigate fluctuations year to year. It's important to note that a 10-year plan is a directional tool meant to gauge future financial needs to the district to support decision-making and is inherently uncertain due to the reliance on assumptions, data limitations, subjectivity to external events, for example, natural disasters and geopolitical events, and an inability to predict policy and regulation changes. The 10-year plan assumptions are based on historical trends, labor contract forecasts, and inflation cost increases. The long-term financial planning isn't about getting everything right from the start. It's about setting a thoughtful direction and being ready to adjust as we learn more. It's dynamic and not static. It's about continuous improvement and not one and done. It's about being proactive and not perfect, and it should be iterative and a living process that evolves with new information and changing circumstances. It is not a fixed destination. It's a compass, not a GPS. Having a 10-year capital and operating plan allowed for the staff to analyze and create scenarios with various rate building and reserve funding strategies that build annual rate increases over time to alleviate fluctuations that result from upcoming large capital projects that require borrowing. This is truly a game changer in the financial planning for the district. I will highlight a few rate and reserve strategy elements of what we were able to tackle during this financial planning cycle, noting that the focus this year was primarily on onboarding the additional 5 years of budget to build the 10-year plan. It is exciting to have the foundation now in place, and there is some work to do. For example, there is some more rate smoothing we can do and further work around asset management reserve funding strategy in the long-term out years. This establishment of a 10-year forecast also positions the district well to inform and incorporate the upcoming DCC strategy work that staff will present at the special operating and capital workshop. So the solid waste utility includes the residual waste long-term planning project, which is the lateral expansion of the Squamish landfill. The landfill is projected to reach capacity by 2030. The expansion project will be primarily funded through borrowing, with annual debt servicing costs of approximately $2.4 million starting in 2032. To prepare for this, staff recommend annual solid waste increases of 5% from 2026 to 2032, gradually building the annual revenue rate and rates needed to cover future debt payments and avoid a sharp hike in 2032. The additional revenue collected during this period, which is approximately 5 to 6 million, will be placed in reserve to help fund the project and reduce borrowing requirements. Currently, the increase is calculated on the curbside collection only. However, staff will be reviewing and analyzing how to redistribute some of the debt servicing burden into the landfill tipping fees in upcoming financial planning cycles. Similarly, the wastewater 10-year plan includes the wastewater treatment plant headworks building replacement project, which is costed at 18 million, which will be funded by borrowing. As a result, future rate increases will be required to support short-term borrowing costs during construction, which is 2029 to 2031, and debt servicing costs of 1.5 million annually, which will start in 2032 upon completion of the project. The current plan includes a steady increase of 3.4% for the asset management reserve funding strategy, which is forecasted to drop down to approximately 1% as the headworks debt servicing short-term and long-term borrowing is fully incorporated into the rate structure and the reserves stabilize. Finally, the water fund 10-year plan does not have any large projects requiring debt. Therefore, the long-term rate strategy is focused on gradually building the annual rate program up to levels recommended in the 2022 Asset Management Plan and 2023 Asset Management Reserve Funding Strategy. With that, I will pass it on to Ms. Turner to walk you through the details of the utility funds.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. My name is Laura Turner, Director of Financial Planning and Reporting, and my pronouns are she, her. Details of the 2026 to 35 utility fund special operating and capital projects will be discussed at an upcoming budget workshop. So today we'll focus on the utility operating budgets and the impact to the 2026 utility fees. The recommendation before you today is that Council approve the 2026 utility service level changes for inclusion in the 2026 to 35 financial plan and approve the 2026 utility rates for inclusion in the District of Squamish fees and charges bylaw. There are a number of key elements of the utility fund financial plan highlighted on this slide. So the district currently operates 3 separate utility funds, which are separated in the financial plan and raise their own revenues through user fees and have their own operating expenses, borrowing, and reserves. Property taxation is not used to fund any part of the utility funds. Increased volume of customers and rate increases contribute to the funding formula of utility rates. Shared costs are allocated to the utilities from the general fund for support department operating budgets such as finance, IT, HR, and legislative services. Budgets for these departments are distributed across all 3 utilities and the general fund on a prorated basis based on their operating budget levels. As you may recall, as part of the 2025 to 29 financial planning process, staff reviewed the interfund allocations and noted that the utilities were being undercharged. As a result, the allocation to utilities was increased from 1.9 million in 2025 or to 2.2 million in 2025 and then to 2.6 million in 2026 across all 3 utilities. This allocation will continue to be reviewed and adjusted annually if required. Reserves are the primary funding source for the utility fund's capital plan, and when reserves are insufficient, borrowing is used. Therefore, reserve building is a critical function for the utility fund infrastructure. DCCs are also an important funding source for capital projects, and this will be discussed in the upcoming capital budget workshop. In September 2023, Council endorsed the Asset Management Reserve Funding Strategy. This included the 2022 Asset Management Plan recommendations and incorporated capital requirements of the 2023 to 27 financial plan to provide a target reserve contribution strategy that would work towards sufficient and sustainable reserves for long-term capital programs. The reserve funding strategy recommendation is to increase utility rates for additional reserve contributions by 1.8% for water, 3.4% for wastewater, and 0.2% for solid waste. So as noted on this slide, water revenue required for 2026 is 6.7 million, an increase of 300,000 over 2025. Increased revenue is required to fund pre-committed or non-discretionary cost increases, as well as service level changes. Details of these increases are included in attachment 3 of the report and include pre-committed increases of 50,000 for labor and benefit contracts, and the increased cost of hydro. Service level changes of 122,000, which will be detailed in a later slide. An increased reserve contribution of 114,000 as per the asset management reserve funding strategy. As a result, staff are recommending a 1.8% rate increase for water, which is consistent with the increase in 2025. This is based on the 1.8% increase as per the asset management reserve funding strategy, adding 114,000 to the water capital reserve for a total contribution of 2.5 million in 2026. Revenues resulting from the increased customer volume is expected to cover the pre-committed operating expense increases and service level changes. The wastewater revenue requirement for 2026 is 9.4 million, which is an increase of 878,000 over 2025. Increased revenues are required to cover pre-committed increases, service level changes, interfund allocations, and reserve contributions. Pre-committed or non-discretionary increases total 280,000 and include labor and benefit contract increases of 49,000, increased cost of contracted services of 130,000 for various contracts, including biosolid disposal, an increased cost of tools, supplies, and chemicals of 76,000. Service level changes total 53,000, which again we'll detail in a later slide. The interfund allocation from the general fund to wastewater increased by 255,000. As mentioned earlier, as part of the 2025 to 29 financial plan process, staff reviewed the budgets allocated from general fund to the utilities and noted that the utilities were being undercharged. And lastly, the reserve contribution, as per the asset management reserve funding strategy, increased by 290,000. As a result, staff are recommending a 7.2% rate increase for wastewater, compared to a 5.7% increase in 2025. This is based on the 3.4% increase for the asset management reserve funding strategy, which will add approximately 290,000 to the capital reserve contribution for a total contribution of 3.5 million in 2026. A further rate increase of 3.7% is required to fund the increased operating expenses of the utility, not covered by an increase in customer volumes. The district's solid waste operating budget is funded by various revenue sources, with curbside collection and landfill tipping fees making up approximately 96% of revenues. For 2026, curbside collection revenue required is 2.9 million, and landfill tipping fee revenue required is 4.2 million for a total of 7.1 million. Increased revenues are required to cover the pre-committed changes, interfund allocations, and reserve contributions. Pre-committed or non-discretionary changes resulted in actually a reduction of 440,000, mainly due to a revised budget for GFL contracted services. Previous year's budgets were based on pandemic levels of landfill usage and have been reviewed and revised in 2026 to more accurately reflect current and prior year actual costs. Debt servicing costs are also reduced by 1 million as the landfill vertical wall borrowing ended in 2025. These decreases were offset by increased interfund allocation from the general fund support departments of 75,000. Noting again, this allocation to solid waste was previously endorsed in the 2025 to 29 financial plan, and further offset by an increased reserve contribution of 1.6 million. This includes contribution under the asset management reserve funding strategy, plus additional contribution for current and future debt servicing costs. Debt servicing costs for the landfill vertical wall ended in 2025. However, to prepare for the landfill expansion funded by borrowing, staff recommend the user fee increase remain consistent year to year, with the resulting surplus being transferred to the reserve. Under this funding strategy, the reserve will then be used to fund future debt servicing costs of the landfill, rather than significantly increasing utility rates in the year the project is complete. As a result, staff are recommending a rate increase of 5.2% for solid waste curbside collection to be applied across small, medium, and large totes, which is consistent with 2025. This is made up of 5% to fund current and future debt servicing costs, plus 0.2% under the reserve funding strategy. Solid waste is minimally impacted by the reserve funding strategy as the cost of landfill expansion is considered an addition and not incorporated into the 2022 asset management plan. The 2026 landfill tipping fee increases vary by item and have been proposed in attachment 2. Service level changes are the additional operating costs added to the base operating budget. The 2026 service level changes are covered by the proposed rate increases and include the following: $122,000 for water, which includes $49,000 for the annual repairs and replacement of water meters and e-readers to ensure accurate reading for billing purposes. $6,000 for IT staff time working on the SCADA communication network. $5,000 for the Finch Drive pump station, which was acquired by the district in 2025, and $60,000 for a water utility operator required due to growth in the water system. Service level changes for wastewater total $53,000 and include $43,000 for utility operator position due to the growth in the sewer system and wastewater treatment plant, and $10,000 for an additional changing space for wastewater collections and treatment staff, which was identified as an occupational health and safety requirement. And that concludes our presentations. I'll turn it back to the chair for discussion, noting the recommendations before council today.
Thank you very much. Yeah, thank you. So, council, who would like to start us with questions? Councillor Hamilton?
Thanks very much for all the work. Small thing, where I really appreciated the rounding in the report. And when you discussed the report, rounded the numbers to something that allowed at least me to focus on the important things, not the dollar here and dollar there, but then showed the full detail in the appendix. Thank you very much. That's greatly appreciated. On to matters of more substance. The landfill, focusing on the landfill for a few minutes here. I notice when we look forward in the 10-year financial, the debt servicing for the landfill seems to decrease from 5% to 2% in 2033. Just wondering if there was, and that I just was having trouble rationalizing it because it seemed like we would be still continuing to service the debt of the landfill expansion.
Do you want clarity?
Yeah. To the chair, if we could get clarity where the percentages are that you're referring to.
Yeah, give me a second. If you want to go on with another question, I can find the exact reference there.
Sure, let's circle back to that. Councillor Stoner?
Thank you. Through the chair, I was just wondering, in the slide that was just presented on the increase in fees for the totes, I think those numbers are different than the ones in our report. So I'm just curious if you could just pull that up for confirmation. So in my report, I have 243 for a small tote. Okay, it's just that one that is that's inverted, I think. Okay, thank you for letting me clarify that in my own brain. The question is, can I confirm that that's actually 243 for the small tote, a $12 increase?
That's correct. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. My other question was just throughout each of the utility budgets, there's a line item that is listed as general fund support departments. And I don't think I've seen this in utility budgets before. Maybe I've just missed it, but I'm wondering if staff can speak to what that is.
through the chair. So in last year's budget, in the 25 to 2029 financial plan, we reviewed the amount of support department budget that gets allocated to the utilities. So it's been in the previous plans, but last year we did a more in-depth review of it. And that's to account for the work done by support departments like HR, finance, IT. And so what we do is we prorate based on the percentage of the overall budgets, a percentage of the support departments to each utility plus the general fund. So of the entire district budget, let's say about 84% is general fund, and then 8% would be wastewater, 6% water, and 2% solid waste. So that's how we would then allocate those support department budgets out to each utility.
Okay, that's helpful, and I think that makes good sense and is good practice. I'm just wondering how that would then impact our general fund budget. Is, I guess, another way of saying that is like, is that part of the reason why we saw a decrease in the percentage increase of our budget from what we had projected last year to what we are seeing this year?
Thank you through the chair. I'll let Ms. Ms. Turner speak to the details, but I just wanted to answer your previous question. This has always been occurring. We've always had an allocation. What likely has possibly changed for folks who've been around for more years and seen for more financial plans is that we have the ability to be more and more transparent each year and actually be pulling out those lines for discussion. But yeah, I'll hand it over to Ms. Turner to speak to the year over year. Simply an audit was done last year. And what that does, sorry, to the general fund is it actually decreases the overall expenditures in the general fund and it's allocated to the others. Again, that's always been the case. The increase was last year to account for the utilities being somewhat underpaying their way of the overall support departments.
Does that address your questions for now, Councillor Stoner?
Yeah, that'll do for now. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Is that a hand? Go ahead, Councillor French.
Thank you, Mayor Herford. I noted in the report the minimum recyclable charge is proposed to be $10 and couldn't quite figure out how that would interact with the free drop-off area at the landfill. So is this a fee for people who bring large amounts that are beyond amounts that generally would be produced from a single family residential home, as in, so like towards commercial amounts? Could you just tell us a little bit more about that proposed $10 recycling fee?
Hi, thank you. Through the chair. My name is Shannon White. I'm the Integrated Solid Waste Specialist at the District of Squamish. I was just doing a bit of a chair exchange, so I caught most of the questions. So I will answer, and please let me know if there's something I've missed. So the new fee that's been proposed is a minimum charge of $10 for anyone who brings recyclable material that is past the scale. So if anyone's familiar with the landfill site, we have a free area, which is paint and some paper and plastics and things like that, and textiles. And then, but on the other side, we have other metal, styrofoam, other recyclables that currently are free. And the idea is that if anyone crosses the scale to use any of those bins that are in the upper area, there'll be a $10 minimum charge. We already have a $10 minimum charge for anyone that's bringing a load of garbage that hits a certain weight threshold. And the idea is that there are fixed costs associated with servicing all those bins, regardless of where they are on our site. And we're seeing considerable increase in servicing costs and processing costs associated, for example, styrofoam. And so the idea is that this would recoup some of those operating expenses that we see. And so to your question about the interaction with our residential curbside, I don't know if that was a question there. Okay, does that answer kind of the general question?
It does, yes, thank you. I was also looking at the sewage sludge details, and I had some questions around that due to my involvement way back with the move to have sewage sludge go into an in-vessel compost system. So I don't remember seeing this in previous years. But that could just be me. In the collection of sewage sludge, the amounts there, are they simply cost recovery, or the increases that we're seeing, are they about more than just recovering costs?
Thank you through the chair. I'd just like to clarify. So when we say sewage sludge, all of the biosolids collected through our wastewater treatment plant are handled separately and managed through that utility fund. This is truly, we have this tipping fee there for when there's an emergency and they have to get rapidly rid of some material, or there's like a cleaning. It comes up kind of maybe once or twice a year. It's really a very limited use of a tipping fee, which is why it might not have come up before. We've had it in place for a while just to recoup. So you'll note that there's a few of the fees that have been harmonized to $300 per ton. And those are all fees that require extra effort. So they require extra coordination. We have to dig the hole in advance. And so therefore they are now going to be at the same price point.
Okay.
And sorry, just to add, we are also running out of space. So we're starting to say it's harder to dig holes for things because of our landfill gas pipeline. So also there's like an impact on that.
Okay, I had a few other questions about sewage sludge, but with that context, I won't bother with those. And maybe you could just confirm for my last question, the collection of sewage sludge at, okay, maybe two parts. Sewage sludge and biosolids are the same thing. And is that correct? And the amount of revenue coming in is fairly insignificant because there isn't significant amounts of those materials coming to the landfill.
Thank you through the chair. I can't speak on behalf of the wastewater utility department as to what they call it. We call it sewage sludge when it comes to us. Maybe through the process, it's something called something else. So I can't comment on the name of it. This is really like, this is where the name has come up through, been defined by interactions with the utility, like the wastewater team. That's where the sewage sludge came from, because it's essentially when the TWAS tank breaks down and they need to clean it rapidly. Don't ask me what the TWAS tank is. I just know that's when we get it, essentially. Yeah, the amount we get is very minimal.
Thanks, Mayor Harford.
Thank you. Councillor Hamilton.
Thanks. Back to the 5% to 2% change in the debt servicing. So it's on in attachment 1 of the RTC. In the table, the utility forecasted revenue requirement increases. And so it's the second last line, and you got to go all the way to the right. And in 2032, the percentage increase is 5%. And in 2033, 2034, and 2035, the percentage increase is 2%. So I was just wondering, why the percentage increase reduced. Thanks.
Through the chair. So as part of our presentation, we mentioned that we were annually going to increase it by 5% to gradually build the rate up till when the debt comes in 2032, and also transferring into a reserve any surplus that we do have. So at that point there, by about 2033, we've been able to build that rate up to a point where we can offset the debt servicing costs going forward. Yeah.
Okay, thanks. I think I may have been convoluting percentage increase and an amount, in my head. So the amount continues to increase, so we'll be, okay, great. I think I get that. And now in the financial plan, the 2025 to 2035 financial plan that was shared with council a few weeks ago, we have landfill closure of $6 million in 2030. Where does that fit? Because all our conversation right now is about the expansion. not about the closure and that 2020-30 bill. Is that all the same thing, or where does that fit?
Thank you through the chair. You're absolutely correct. We always talk about landfill expansion and not the landfill closure. And so while the landfill expansion lays onto the current landfill, we will have to close certain parts of our current landfill. And so that is why it's significantly less. And also at the same time, and it's a highly regulated piece. That's why we have also, it's in the reserve, I believe. Don't quote me on where the money's sitting, but we've been saving for that closure at the same time as saving for the expansion now.
Okay, so these buildups, the rate increases are taking into account the $6 million closure for 2030. Okay, but it's probably something we had planned about, so we're not talking about it now because it's already sort of baked in. Is that right? Okay. My next question is now not directly about these financial plans, but about financial planning and how we're doing it. So I'm going to step back for a second. I looked back at how much we were projecting our budget would be for our 2026 budget would be. Back in 2024, back in 2022, I started, we projected 2026, let's pick solid waste. I can give you the numbers, but they're not terribly relevant. We projected it to be some number. And then in 2023, we projected 2026 to be some number. In 2024, we projected 2026 to be some number. And each year, if we look at that trend, each year we tend to see an increase of about 5%. So every year, our increases for the future increase by about 5%. Is that like a known financial planning thing and something you like? Is there an obvious reason for that, or is that not an obvious thing?
Thank you for the question and thank you for the observation through the chair. I would say yes and no. So as things progress, there's two things that happen: cost increase, as well as we narrow. When you're speaking specifically to major projects that shift the revenue requirement, as things narrow, we get better understanding of costs. So generally, we have not, and it's a known financial planning thing, things don't typically go down. They typically go up. And as we get closer, we get more refined. So 5% isn't necessarily the number, but increases is generally what we tend to see.
Okay, yeah, and I wasn't speaking specifically of capital. Similar things happen with capital budgeting, capital project budgeting, but I was looking at the overall cost, the expense number within our financial plan for each piece. The reason it concerns me, or the reason that I think it's important, if we project forward this 5% extra that we tend to have been collecting every year for the past 4 or 5 years, our 2035 numbers are not like 10 million for solid work, for solid waste, it's 15 or 16 million. Is there any way to account for this known unknown thing in financial planning, or are we constantly going to be like sort of 5% shy and increasing the future by 5% each year?
Again, thank you for the question. I think also what is important to understand is as the district has developed more software systems, we've implemented better projections, we're constantly improving. Our our hope is that that 5% will not continue. That is a really critical piece why we have a 10-year plan too, is to be able to see those things further out. Also, our various budget managers are doing an incredible amount of work around prioritization, getting things more accurate before we get into the financial planning. So there's a lot of process improvement. So I think a sweeping, we will be 5% higher. We don't believe that will necessarily be true, or the compounding of 5%. We continue to refine. At the same time, the world is changing rapidly, and we are dealing with a lot of unknowns. So what you can do and what you can always hold to in financial planning is it's iterative. We must do it every year, and we have to keep refining and improving.
Yeah, thanks. I absolutely agree, and that it is iterative, and it's the fact that we are planning. We were 5-year planning is the thing that allows us to see that this compounding effect. Do we have any mechanism or any way to plan or to measure this impact as we move forward? Because as we start planning our 10-year planning, we actually gain a significant, we can, if we look at the data and organize our data effectively, we can gain insights as to how well we do in our projections. Is there any sort of plan to do that on a long-term basis?
Thank you for the question. I would say absolutely. This is, again, we are trying to build our foundations, and critical pieces to the start were the software, then the 10-year plan, then the key metrics, then the prioritization. All of that combined allows us to not only set benchmarks for the future, but to look retroactively and say, hey, where were we? How far have we come? Use some of those trendings and inform our financial planning more.
Thanks very much.
Thank you. I'm through my speakers list. I have some questions of my own. And welcome, Councillor Pettingill. Thank you for joining us. My question is around the tote pricing. In the past discussions around this table, we've adjusted that in attempts to motivate folks to go to the smaller totes, and with the understanding that at some time, if we're successful with that, we'll need to recoup the expenses and adjust again. And I just wondered how we're doing with that, or if people are starting to migrate. Are we starting to see the impacts of that? Has all that discussion come to nothing, which can also happen? And just how we're thinking about that, or when we'll be looking at that further if we don't have the answer today.
Thank you, through the chair. Excellent question. And I don't have all the data in front of me to give you the fulsome answer on that. So while I would like to note that our small tote is still substantially cheaper. It's at least $200 cheaper than a medium, which is still a great incentive to folks to move to that size if it fits their needs. We have seen every year we have tote exchange where people can exchange their size, and we do see a significant amount in each of those times. So probably about 100 to 200 residents or households make a switch of some sort, and I would say the majority of those are usually going to a small. Sometimes we see medium moving bigger, but often it's folks moving to a small. So I would say the price does drive behavior, especially with the difference in pricing that we're seeing now.
Okay, that's good that that's effective. Now, if we woke up and everybody was on a small, that would break the model here from a funding perspective. So how do we, I'm trying to understand if we're in the right spot, if we've been through a period of time where it needed that financial incentive to switch people, but we need to make sure that we're still recovering the appropriate revenue. How are we looking there? That number surprised me, the number of people switching, but I guess people, I'm just not sure how much of an impact that's having, or if this is something that needs a further look at a different point in time.
Thank you. I think this is something that staff could review in more detail in the next round of the next development of next year's budget. It isn't something we've looked at whether like if you're suggesting the small should be significantly increased in price, for example. So that is something that we could look at.
Yeah, I think the fact that we're not concerned that we're generating enough revenue through that source gives me comfort for today. But I think over time we need to be intentional about that to make sure that we're not setting ourselves up to underfund that mechanism. And like many things, we would like to do that in a as smooth a way as possible, so we don't have to make a big course correction at some point throughout. But I'm satisfied with the level of concern I'm seeing on this particular point today. I'm happy, but I would like to flag that there. I'd like to understand that and sort of look at what that trend has been over the last while, and sort of model that out a bit and see at what point we may need to adjust. I'll leave that there. I'm going to go to Councillor Pettingill next, and then Councillor Anderson.
Yeah, thanks. And I apologize for just joining now. I'm in Victoria with the Lower Mainland Local Government Association, doing some advocacy on behalf of all Lower Mainland local governments. And I did send my questions ahead of time, so if you've already answered them as part of the presentation, just let me know and I'll go back and watch it. Otherwise, I'll start with one that hopefully is not too much of a tangent, but wondering now, given where we are in a residential water metering, is there any potential or capacity that for people who want to opt into sort of a detached home water meter, even if it's at high expense to them, is that something that is possible if they're willing to pay enough, or are there sort of other technical constraints at this moment?
Looks like we have Mr. Rolston online who's prepared to speak to this, I believe. He's smiling, so I think I can say that.
Yeah, thank you. Good afternoon. Through the chair, my name is David Rolston, I'm Senior Manager of Infrastructure Planning. So an optional program to opt into water metering for single family residential is a possibility. The program would likely be set up in such a way that those customers would pay for the cost of the installation, and then they could be transitioned over to a new rate structure that will be forthcoming in 2027 for all of our other metered customers. And it's a means by which we could continue to encourage water conservation for customers who would prefer to be billed based on their water consumption rather than a flat rate, which is how all single-family residential customers are currently paying. And there would be some bylaw updates required in order to enable that, but it is certainly possible.
Okay, thank you. I'll leave that there for now for the moment, but maybe something for us to consider as a council, whether or not. I've had some people express interest in that. So thank you. Going on to another topic, just trying to wrap my head around, I understand our asset management and the work we've done there is focused on replacement of existing assets, not new assets. But when we have something where we're replacing but also expanding something, so it's a mix of old and new, can you explain how that works in terms of our asset management fund? Where does that sort of capital land, or is it split somehow?
I can address that one as well if you would like, Ms. Boxer. Yeah, okay. So the asset management plan looks, as you say, at replacing like for like. So essentially replacing end-of-life infrastructure with the exact same thing. In cases where growth is a factor and we need to increase the size of, say, a pipe or any of our infrastructure, then and there's a growth component, then that isn't factored into our asset management plan, but it is factored into our asset-specific master plans. So things like our water master plan, our sewer master plan, integrated stormwater management plans. So that would take a more detailed dive into each of those, either utilities or assets that are funded from the general fund, and it would look at the costs of increasing size. So that's factored in as part of the master plans, and that also feeds into the financial planning that the finance department works on. And then depending on what the situation is and what is triggering the growth, there are different funding mechanisms. So development cost charges are an option if it is being triggered by growth, or if not, then those costs could be funded through general or utility funds.
We've got an additional reply from Ms. Boxer, I believe.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you, Mr. Ralston, for that fulsome reply. I just wanted to add a point of clarification as well, is the asset management plan is specific to just replacement, but the asset management reserve funding strategy takes the master plans, takes the asset management plan, puts it in, and we've based it on the 5 years. So now we have the opportunity to utilize our 10-year at the next reserve funding strategy update. But it takes that projection, puts a trend on top of the asset management so that we are taking it into account when we're building our reserves, that we're looking at not only replacement, but also including new capital as well.
Councillor Pettingill, do you have a follow-up on this topic? I have hands in the room for a follow-up on this. So I'll give first crack to you, but I'll...
Yeah, no, my next questions are on a different topic.
Okay. Councillor Hamilton?
Thanks very much. So, Mr. Rolston, one of the would the headworks building, the wastewater headworks building, would that be an example of one of these things that's partially due to replacement and partially due to growth, or does that fit all into one bucket?
Through the chair, that is arising from a detailed assessment that was done as part of our wastewater treatment plant asset management plan. So yeah, it is being triggered mostly due to just the existing asset not meeting standards and approaching end of life rather than growth.
Oh, okay. I had this vision in my mind that we had a second, what's the big circular thing called, clarifier? We had a second one of those, so I had a naive vision that we would need another. That's one of the things that triggered the headworks upgrade need, but that's not true.
No, it is being triggered by the fact that it doesn't meet seismic standards currently, and there are some structural issues with the building. So that's the primary intent of that. I think as we get into that project, we can determine whether during its replacement, whether it will be upsized and therefore accommodate future growth. And if that's the case, then I think there could be opportunities to fund a portion of those costs through development cost charges, but we have to do some further assessment before we can make that determination.
Great, thanks very much.
Okay, back to you, Councillor Pettingill.
Great, thanks. So the next thing, when I looked at, now that we have a 10-year plan, I was wondering why it still seems that year over year there are some jumps in utility rates from year to year. And I'm wondering why we didn't or wouldn't smooth that a little more, or is this at a level that we would consider fairly smooth?
Thank you for the question through the chair. The smoothing piece of it is a work in progress. The focus of staff this year was getting a 10-year. There was some smoothing aspects going on. There were several versions. If you look at the newest version that was published on Monday of last week, it's significantly smoother. Yeah, and we will continue to refine that as the out years come, but there's a lot of elements that feed into that smoothing. It isn't just about an Excel sheet, so to speak. There's a lot of moving parts, but yeah, staff have done quite a good sweep so far, and particularly you'll see some differences in out years, and that has a lot to do with bigger projects that come on, managing debt servicing, trying to utilize short-term versus long-term debt primarily. But we'll continue to refine as we go.
Are you good for now, Councillor?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, thank you. I've got Councillor Anderson, then Stoner, then Hamilton.
Thank you. I have a couple of questions arising from the solid waste projects outlined in the reserve continuity schedule. Horizontal pipe expansions, landfill gas horizontal pipe expansions. We have $433,000 forecast for 2027 and $500,000 for 2030. These appear to me to be substantial figures for laying down this pipe, and I don't recall them being discussed as projected costs back in 2019, which is the last session I can recall where we discussed the landfill gas options. And we chose in October 2019 between two options, an active gas collection system. And I'm just going to quote from the report, and Ms. White, or to staff, I'm really just asking to, where are these pipe expansions, and if we could just plot them out with relative to our landfill expansion project. So to quote from the 2019 report, a main benefit of this system, the active gas collection, is that it can be installed in the closed and active sections, our current landfill, concurrently, and be scaled as the active landfill section continues to fill until capacity is reached in approximately 2027. So I wonder if I could ask staff if we could just map out these pipe expansions. Do they involve the current landfill only, or are we already projecting that $500,000 pipe expansion in 2030 into the new landfill expansion area? They are substantial costs. I just don't recall that we'd foreseen that level of cost for this pipe, these laying down this pipe. Thank you.
Thank you through the chair. To answer the first question, the landfill gas pipeline project was definitely the initial cost estimates that came in 2019 were underestimated. And so what you're seeing here is the refinement of that budget. I will say that there will be a capital projects budget workshop where we can, the project manager of this will be on site. So he can, if there's any gaps I'm filling, he can fill in at that time. And to map it out for you, so when the pipes were originally installed, vertical pipes were installed on the closed section, so drilled straight down, and those have been connected. And then we laid horizontal pipes where we've been actively, sorry, I'm getting farther away from the microphone here, where we are actively collecting garbage. And then as we get higher and higher, we layer another installment so that we can capture the gas that is coming off of the garbage that has been laid between the pipes. And so that's why they're coming in layered installments, you know, every 2 or 3 years. And so we just wrapped up the latest horizontal installment was just brought online. Well, it should be brought online anytime soon. Things are a little bit disrupted at this point in time. So that's what, if that's giving you enough mapping. So the landfill expansion project, these all tie into our current flare station. And then as the landfill is expanded, the landfill gas pipe is included in that budget. So you're not gonna, it's not right now as an individual line item, it is incorporated in, and those will be tied into our current existing landfill gas flare station as well.
Thank you, Ms. White. It's helpful to know that we may have another opportunity to discuss the general picture up there upcoming. And also it's useful to understand that this is not a simple pipe laying project from your description relative to other types of pipe laying that we do. My second question is, and referring to the same table, the design and construction and the pre-design and permitting for the long-term residual waste planning. We have item approved costs for 2025. And these and not for following years. What does this tell us about the status of the expansion, if you like, that long-term planning? Are we wrapping up these projects? Is that what this tells us? That pre-design and permitting and design and construction, are they substantially in hand, and therefore we're not projecting costs for those activities in the next year and following?
I'll get started, and definitely if I'm missing anything, I'll ask my colleagues to fill in for me. So the uh, the the budget that we have for 2026, we actually anticipate there to be some carry forwards from 2025 budget due to delays in permitting. So there's been, due to the provincial job action, we've had struggles in getting some permit through their system. I'm very excited that they're back in the job and have sent some emails already this morning. But unfortunately, that's going to push some of our costs probably to 2026. And so there'll definitely be carry forwards. I feel like I'm missing an answer also. Is that okay?
Just the point of clarification. So the reserve continuity schedules that are included in this package are here to highlight the rate increases and reserve contributions from rates and revenues. They don't show the whole picture of capital. We have a capital workshop and special operating project coming up. These are specifically just the funding sources of those pieces of those projects within the reserve continuity. So it's dangerous to speak about capital when only looking at reserves and not seeing the capital plan fully, just to put that.
Very good. That's helpful. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I've got Councillor Stoner, then Pettingill.
Yeah, thank you. Just on this piece of not seeing the capital budget as a whole, I appreciate that it has been published and it's publicly available, but we haven't had the chance to have our capital and special operating project workshop for budget. And so I'm just curious about process. I hear that this needs to be adopted by the end of this calendar year. But I still feel like we're missing a bit of a piece of the conversation, not having had the chance to dig into that capital project workshop. And so I'm just curious if you have brought forward a proposal of 3 readings today for utilities budget, if there's an opportunity, or I guess maybe how far can we delay that in the hopes that we might see the capital project workshop budget workshop in advance of supporting 3 readings?
The recommendation, just to clarify, is approve the utility service level change for inclusion and approve the utility rates for inclusion in the fees and charges bylaw. So it's not readings per se, but I will go to staff for a response.
Yeah, thank you for that, Mayor, and thank you for the question through the chair. So specifically, we're just looking for the rates, but because it's all tied in, it's important to show the reserve continuities. And unfortunately, we don't have the capital discussion. This is actually sometimes the order in which we have to do things either way. It is unfortunate that we're not able to, at this point, have the fulsome conversation before we have the rates approved. The one thing to note about the capital specifically is that it's funded by reserves and borrowing and other things, not so rate specific. Where it links to the rates is really how much we contribute each year. So what we're after this year, at this meeting specifically, is to talk about the service level changes. So really specifically around the operating as well as the revenue and rate requirements.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I think I'm just having a challenge with the ensuring that we are collecting enough through fees to contribute to reserve for that long-term capital plan. And so that's the piece that I'm just trying to tease apart here, but appreciate just where we're at. So my other questions are just a few detailed ones. The fiscal services line item in the wastewater budget basically goes to 0 for 2027 and 2028. I'm just curious if staff can speak to why that would be.
Through the chair. So in last year's, the 25 to 29 financial plan, council endorsed smoothing in of 2 positions. And so that's what you'll see in 25 and 26. There's about 200,000 in each of those years. And then there's nothing in 27, 28. And then in 2029, the short-term debt for the wastewater treatment plant starts to come in. And so that's where the funding for that starts. With the long-term debt starting in 2032. So that's where you'll see the 1.4 jump up in that year.
Okay, that's really helpful. Thank you. And then my other question.
Councillor Stoner, you frozen on our screen. Yep, try without video. Thank you.
Hi,
Well,
are you able to
hel-
hear me again?
hello, welcome back. I was about to recess to give you some time, so thank you. Go ahead, and let's just don't worry about the camera for
Okay.
now. The audio is much better without. Thank you.
Okay. So the annual repair and replacement envelopes in both the wastewater budget and the water budget are quite a bit smaller in 2026 than they were both in 2025. And then as we see them going forward in 2027 and beyond. And I'm just curious if staff can speak to why that envelope is shrinking this year. And if we don't have the right folks in the room or on the call, we can bring that back if need be.
Through the chair. So the 2025 balance that you see, the 2.2 million, I'm just looking at the wastewater right now. And so that would include the carry forward from last year as well, and likely the same for the water. So then we're starting lower in 955 and 26, and then gradually building that out year over year.
And just to add to that, that is some work that the capital committee has created in terms of starting to try to build back those annual budgets for capital works in those two utility funds year over year as we build up our rates and build up the reserves.
Okay, but for the water system, for example, we were at 2.5 in 2025. It drops by $1 million this year and then increases by 2 million next year. And in light of trying to smooth these items over, knowing that annual repair and maintenance envelopes are pretty critical, it just seems odd that we drop it by $1 million this year, unless that money is being allocated to different or specified projects within the budget that I'm just not seeing here. And if it's helpful, it's line item 945233300 in the reserve continuity schedule for water.
Thank you for the question. If it's all right, I think that it's probably best that we speak to that within the capital discussion, because that is a capital project. We don't have the folks here, unfortunately, to speak to the actual envelope for that annual capital allocation for this year.
So
Yeah.
just if I can, just on process here, and I understand that we don't have the we've been through a similar process a few times now as a council, and it happens in sometimes we need some information that we don't have yet to feel comfortable with where we are. With this and what we're being asked today, when we do our capital workshop, which we will have to do shortly, if something comes up or something comes out of that that feels impactful to these rates, like, what do we do there? Like, I'm just trying to understand if we're trying to dodge a bullet here or there, or because these two processes, obviously, we are discussing the overlap. So how do you see that going? Should something be I don't know about a showstopper, but impactful in that discussion, and we want to feel a need to make a change? Is that a possibility, or how could or should that go?
Thank you for the question through the chair. it would be challenging to make a rate change later on because rates start in January 1st for many aspects of the utility funds. I think what is important to understand from the capital side of things is it's a reserve contribution, and we're trying to build those reserve contributions to be similar year over year. So if there's fluctuations in capital, it stays in those reserves. So I'll leave it there, but that's really the difference between rates. We try not to have rates fluctuate annually because of capital. Now, there's instances when we have large capital projects, and that's why we're doing the 10-year to build those reserves over time. So as I appreciate why it's challenging to see them both here, but really, truly, the rates don't have a major, are not impacted majorly year over year by those capital items, reserves.
Okay, so council, with that in mind, we'll try to, if we get an answer that'll be a capital discussion, then I think we need to try to move forward if we can in the discussion. But I'll go back to you, Councillor Stoner, for additional questions, or if you have a follow-up on this specifically, as we've already started down this path on this item.
Yeah, just a follow-up on this for me to try and wrap my head around it. So this is a difference on $1 million potential draw from the existing reserve, not a difference in $1 million of contribution to that reserve for this fiscal.
That's correct.
And on a total balance of $8 million, I guess I'm just curious, like, what impact does that have on reserve? If it's 1/8 of our reserve amount. How much, if we had to like make that up in future years, is that a substantial impact on our fee? Like, would we have to do a significant impact or increase in our fees, or is that a pretty minimal increase in our fees year over year for $1 million?
Well, it's difficult to answer, and we're not entirely sure what the question specifically is, but if we're trying to follow, the impact on the rates, if we were to, maybe I'm trying to phrase this differently, if we were to not have that $1 million, isn't really significant on the rates because we will continue to be building the reserves up. So the idea is to be not thinking about rates and capital spend in the same year. It's about looking at 10 years, assuming that whatever is in that capital for that particular year is either going to be in that year or in future years. So again, looking at an overall 10-year. What the reserve continuity tries to show us is those projections. So we're always looking at the balance out 10 years of the reserve, and you can see the revenues coming in and you can see the expenditures going out. They're not always the same. We do our best to try to get them to be close to the same, but there is, by the very nature of capital, projects that will fluctuate, and you try to get rates to not fluctuate in the same respect. Hopeful that is sort of answering your question or getting close.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's helpful. I will spend some time chewing on that. My last question was just around the solid waste component. As we do start to shift towards collecting reserves to fund significant capital expenditures incoming with the expansion of the landfill. I'm just curious if we continue to have, or if we've had any conversations with the regional district in terms of taking on that asset, given that we are unusual in the province in having a landfill on our books as opposed to the regional district books. I see this as a continued opportunity to expand the regional service into the regional district.
Hi, thank you through the chair. To date, there has been no discussion with the regional district about what you've proposed, about them taking over the landfill and having it as their asset and run by them.
Okay. I'll give that some thought. I think that there's a diversity of ways that that could happen in terms of it not necessarily being taken over by them. I think we could still run it, but I'm just curious about getting that expansion off of our books and onto regional books, because I think that that would be helpful for us overall. But I will think about that. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Councillor Pettingill?
Yeah, thanks. So if I understood correctly, the asset management reserve fund strategy incorporates both replacement and growth. Like the actual fund is just replacement, but the strategy overall contemplates both. So if that's correct, and for example, on page 11 of our agenda, there's the increase per the reserve fund strategy, but also additional rate customer increase. I'm just wondering if you can clarify what is going into that additional rate customer increase.
I'll just add a point of clarification on what I just heard, and then I'll pass over on the additional customer/rate increases. So the asset management reserve funding strategy, which is our stated contributions to reserves, are replacement, and it attempts to project as best as we can any new projects. So the last one was in 2023, so it really only took the snapshot of 23 to 27, sorry, financial planning, and used that as a trend. So that provided us with our reserve contribution annually. And then I'll hand it over to Ms. Turner on the additional customer and rate line.
Sure. So as part of the financial plan for each utility, we know that it has to balance. So we'll collect enough revenues for each utility to balance out the new or the operating expenses in the fund. And so if part of that increase is going to be for the asset management reserve funding strategy, the remaining rate increase or the remainder to get to that revenue level that we need, it either has to come from an increase in customers or an increase in rate, or a combination of the two. So you can see in the schedules where we sort of referred to it as a customer increase/rate increase. We forecast the customer increases because there's no third party to confirm with us for the customer volume. So when we're trying to project to the out years, we know that we need to increase it by that amount to get to that total revenue. We just don't know what the proportion is, if it's going to be from rate or customers.
Okay, so if I understand correctly, then our management reserve fund strategy is always going to be a little bit out of date because we can't, so the additional rate per customer increase is essentially covering that gap in the sort of obsolescence of that. And so that would incorporate like some unforeseen things, whatever our sort of error in assuming inflation, that sort of thing, that captures all of that. It's not necessarily a rate increase. It's sort of how the requisition has grown relative to the reserve fund strategy, and then we will, there will be some non-market change, and then there may be a rate adjustment sort of bundled. Is that accurate?
Through the chair, yes, some of it is very accurate, and some of it needs a little bit of more clarification. So the asset management reserve funding strategy is similar to, say, an expenditure, that it's a contribution that we take from the rates and put into the reserve annually. We also have all of our expenditures that we are forecasting per year. That expenditures, we have our standard revenue, and then the rest of it, including the asset management reserve funding strategy piece, has to be covered by either rate or growth in customers. And so that growth in customers is similar to what you would say is sort of like the non-market change, but it isn't non-market change per se. It can be, there are two different elements. And as Ms. Turner said, there is no third party as with general taxation that confirms to us what a non-market change is. So it's very much, this is the additional revenue that we require over the next 10 years that could look like more customers and that could look like rate increases. We just know that's the revenue we need.
Okay, and so then is it fair to say that over time and as we refine our asset management reserve fund strategy and sort of refine our 10-year budgeting process, that additional rate slash customer increase number should get smaller and smaller? That's sort of our margin of error, which we plan to get smaller as we get better at those other processes. Is that accurate?
Through the chair, not entirely, because there is the element of increase in expenditures. So as expenditures increase, rate needs to increase. The asset management would be refined over time as we understand the capital needs better, but there's always going to be rate increase, or sorry, expenditure increases. So that is the line in which it will absorb the expenditure increases or the revenue required for those additional expenditures.
And sorry, and I apologize if I'm going too far off track, just cut me off, but I thought expenditures as we get better would be incorporated in the asset management reserve fund strategy, and we sort of get better at looking out further and incorporating them so they end up more frequently in that line and not have to be captured in the additional rate customer increase line over time.
I think where the confusion lies here is we're talking about operating versus capital. Asset management reserve funding strategy is specifically talking about the contributions to reserves that's required for capital. The additional revenue, either through customers or rate increases, is specific to operating.
Okay, I'm gonna chew on that for a bit. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm through my speakers list here. So I just want to be conscious if everyone needs more discussion on this topic. We do have recommendations here. I don't know if everyone's ready for that portion. Councillor Hamilton?
I actually have a question that followed on from Councillor Stoner's questions about the, I just picked the the water services reserve contributions. So the 2025 number contribution is about 2.5 million, 2026, 1.5, 2027 projected to be 3.5 or so million. When I looked back at the same numbers that we projected in 2024, the 2025 number was about 2.5 million. The 2026 number was about 1.5 million, but the 2027 number was also around 1.5 million. So it looks like there's been an increase in that projected reserve contribution for 2027 from last year to this year.
Thank you for the question. I think bear with me. I think what you're saying is the lines below that are showing every year of the expenditure. So the capital expenditure, not the reserve contribution.
No, I looked back. I think I'm looking at the reserve contribution. When I looked back to the reserve contributions from the 2024 report. Yeah, a year ago we were here, and the number projected for 2027 back in 2024 was a roughly 1.5 million, and now it's 3.5 million. Is that is that a known? I mean, I'm sure it's known, but what's the origin for that? Maybe I need to be clearer on what numbers I'm looking at.
We might have to take that one away. If we're looking at the reserve continuity schedule, we're not talking about the revenue. We're talking about the line.
How about I put it together and send it as an email to be
sounds great.
potentially addressed at the capital planning, because this fits in the capital planning, right? Great, thanks.
Okay, thank you for that. I'm not seeing any hands, so I feel we have, we're in the, I see your hand, Councillor Stoner. Thank you for that. So we'll go to Councillor Stoner and we'll try to work towards consideration of the two recommendations we have.
Thank you. Just to ease my mind on this, the 1.8% increase for the water fund is intended to include or smooth out that projected increase in annual capital spend. Is that correct? Like the way that we're setting our rates is accounting for the capital planning that we have done. And so we are collecting enough and putting it away year over year to account for that increase. I just want to make sure that my head has wrapped around that appropriately.
So through the chair, that's correct. So the 1.8% that we're increasing and we're collecting on gets transferred to the reserve every year. And so that will go into the capital reserve to fund the projects in the future.
Okay, thank you. And then I also just want to double check an assumption that I've made here in my previous comment or question around the solid waste utility. I appreciate there's a bunch of work that would have to go into this, but would shifting the debt that would be required to support the landfill expansion from the district books to the regional district books help with our debt availability as a district?
Thank you for the question through the chair. It would really depend on what a shift means. So if they were to own the capital asset wholly, then absolutely that would take the debt off. If they're underwriting debt for us, that is not a possibility. They currently underwrite all of our debt. So if it's just a point of them holding that debt and having no ownership, then unfortunately, no, it does not.
But if it's like similar to how the pool is set up, that is an owned asset by the regional district, correct? But it's operated by us.
Correct. The pool is owned by the regional district and operated by us.
Thank you for that clarification.
Okay, Council, we have two considerations here. Go ahead, Councillor Pettingill.
Yeah, so I'm still on this additional rate / customer increase. The reason that is above CPI, so this is, I think I'm understanding, is more operational. The reason it's above CPI would be because, you know, if we need new infrastructure for growth, you have to build a new facility in 10,000 citizen chunks, for example. You don't build it sort of one new resident at a time. And so if we build a new facility, we need 4 new staff, but we may only have like 500 new citizens. And so it's that sort of difference in the granularity of how you build things. And that's why we would see the additional rate / customer increase above CPI. I'm just trying to understand why that is sort of the jumps, why we'd see jumps there.
Through the chair. So that's correct. So part of the increases, it could be labor contracts, debt servicing, service level changes, and when combined, all those things could be above CPI. So there's a lot of different factors that would go into that increase.
Okay, I'm going to take another try at this. Council, we do have two recommendations together, and I don't have any additional speakers on my list, so I think we're ready for that. Is there anyone that would like to move them. They can go both together. Moved by Councillor French. Is there a seconder? Second by Councillor Anderson. Councillor French, would you like to speak to it?
Yes, please. So what I see here is responsible long-term fiscal planning in terms that many people would understand. Our own RRSPs. We're saving for the future when these infrastructure elements need funding for either significant maintenance or full-on replacement. And we're currently seeing how important this is as we deal with a recreation center that is in desperate need of expansion and upgrading. And we quite simply don't have reserve funds that have been saved over the decades from when that recreation center was first built to support those needed upgrades and major maintenance work. So some might look at these increases and believe they're hard to swallow because it's real money and it's real increases for many people who are struggling to afford what's currently being charged, let alone future increases. This is pain, though, that I think we need to endure to make sure that in the future we're well set up so that when these infrastructure pieces need to be either given significant maintenance or replaced, we've got something to tap into to either get it done completely or at minimum get it started with support of taxation and or government grants. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Other comments on this? I'll not seeing any other hands. I'll just be brief. Thank you for all the work on this. This is great to see that long-term view, and I think gives comfort in the for me around the short and medium term pieces, that knowing we're making the we have the appropriate rates to support those initiatives over the long term. So I'm happy to support this. I look forward to the capital discussion, which I know is kind of overlaps in the Venn diagram with this one. But I'm happy to see this this move forward. And yeah, so thank you very much for the work. I've got Councillor Pettingill, then Stoner.
Yeah, just want to thank staff for this. It has been, I guess this is the approach I had assumed municipalities took before I got onto council in terms of, planning out and really building reserves and having that money before you needed it. It is painful when you're making that transition of just relying on debt or some gift of bag of money to fall from the sky to build you some new piece of infrastructure. So uh, um, yeah, it's this approach gives me a lot more comfort. It does seem to be a philosophical shift from where we've had at times with other things is rely, it seems to me, much more heavily on debt and uh this sort of planning for the future, I think, is what a lot of people intuitively expect. And so I think it's the right approach. But again, as I have to recognize, as we make that transition and start putting money aside while catching up with a lot of things that money wasn't put aside for, it is financially challenging for people. So I think, though, if we want to be prudent, we have to take these steps. I think it will be worth some future or further conversations about how we manage the landfill. And there are a lot of opportunities, having just seen Metro Vancouver's presentation on their waste planning. I think there may be some, not just beyond just our own debt situation, um, looking at ways to collaborate with the regional district and neighboring regional districts on waste. I think the more we can do to facilitate that probably makes sense. I suspect my colleague will have some more comments about that. So I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Councillor Stoner.
Yeah, thank you through the chair. I will support the motion on the floor. My only hesitation is not having gone through the capital and the special operating workshop at this point. But appreciate where we are at in this year's budget cycle and process, and the timing just isn't really lining up. I do have confidence that the rates that we're setting are accounting for the increase that we need in user fees in order to ensure that we have enough money set aside to do the capital projects that we need to do to ensure that all of our utilities are keeping pace with the rates of growth and that we are saving sufficiently in order to smooth out some of the larger projects that we know are forthcoming in some of the various utilities. There will still be a need to use debt servicing over time. The reserves that we're going to be able to secure are not going to be sufficient for all the projects ahead, but it will hopefully smooth out those requirements. And I think that in general, that practice is good practice in the direction that we have been trying to get to across all of our budgeting, but especially in our utility fees. So I think this makes good sense. And once motion has been voted on, I do have a subsequent motion for council consideration, just a heads up. Thanks.
Thank you. Seeing no further hands for comments, I will call the question. All in favor? And any opposed? Seeing none, motion carries unanimously. And Councillor Stoner, you have an additional motion for us to consider?
Yeah, I would like council to consider the motion that staff be directed to begin discussions with the SLRD about the potential for the Squamish landfill expansion to be owned by the SLRD. And if that's seconded, I'll speak to it.
Councillor French seconds. Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. I think that this is an important discussion to start having. I don't want to presuppose that this is actually going to be easy or let alone possible, but I think it's important to have the discussion now and not in a year or two as we continue to go down the process of very, very actively working on this landfill expansion. But knowing the multitude of challenges within our budget and the impact of the debt that we'll have on our debt servicing capacity, I think it's important to explore all potential options. And this is probably one of our biggest opportunities to move some potential debt from our budget to another entity. It is very unusual across the province for municipalities to own landfills. That is not the norm. And we know that our landfill is very much a regional asset already. It is used by Area D as well as others. And so I would like to say that we have a good working relationship with the environmental and waste folks at the regional district. Typically, our waste reduction strategies extend throughout the corridor and are regional in nature. And so I think having this conversation with the SLRD is an important one and would appreciate if staff could initiate it. Thank you.
Go ahead, Councillor French.
Thanks, Mayor Herford. I completely agree with Councillor Stoner. This is one of those situations where if you don't take a shot, you're not going to score a goal. If we don't ask, if we don't pursue, we don't have the opportunities that Councillor Stoner just outlined as the potential advantages of partnering in this way with the regional district. So I think that this is an important conversation to initiate. If it doesn't go anywhere and if it gets significant pushback, we can at least say that we tried and we did the work for our taxpayers to help free up some potential borrowing.
Thank you. Councillor Pettingill, then Anderson.
Yeah, thanks. Happy to support this. And just for clarity, I know our teams at the District of Squamish and the Regional District are talking together and collaborating frequently. And so this is just the one very specific aspect, which is particularly important. And I thank my colleague for highlighting this particular element, which it sounds like hasn't been a focus. So I didn't want to give the impression that our teams aren't collaborating in general, but it's just this one particular element that is worth highlighting and focusing on. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Anderson.
I've followed this discussion for 30 years now. It's not a new question or a discussion topic. The status of our landfill with respect to the region. And there are a number of issues that have been reviewed over the years, and they're going to come back to us in any future discussion. Not being an active member of the SLRD board, I'm not up to date on the status of the Regional Solid Waste Management Plan and its review or pending review or completed review. We haven't discussed that here in this chamber. I have been a part of the last review that took place, I guess, just over a decade ago, and there's a lot of issues there that were addressed that relate to Councillor Stoner's motion. I would appreciate some update from the SLRD board for this council as to the status of that regional solid waste management plan. It has a lot of implications for the issue addressed in Councillor Stoner's motion. Thank you.
Thank you. Just briefly, I think this is is good direction. I know that as others have stated, I know our staffs are working well together, but specific direction to work well together on this question is totally appropriate at this point. And in the spirit of Councillor French's comments, you miss 100% of the shots you don't take. So I'm happy to chase this one down to its conclusion and see what can be done in this matter. With that, I'll call the question. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Okay, thank you very much. We're on to our next item, which is Health Canada Emergency Treatment Fund application. Do we have, sorry, I wasn't sure. Or are you just waiting for some? Let's take a quick recess. We're slightly ahead, which I understand could be disorienting for many folks, including those at the table here. So let's take 10 minutes and we'll be back. We'll recess the meeting for 10 minutes. Thank you very much. Okay, everybody, welcome back to the special business meeting. We're on item 3, subset 2, the Health Canada Emergency Treatment Fund application. I'll turn over to staff to run us through the presentation.
Hi, thank you. Good afternoon. My name is Pascal St. Louis. I'm the General Manager of Public Safety. Today, I'm also joined by 2 colleagues. So I've got Mrs. Lori Pine, the Executive Director of Squamish Helping Hands, as well as Ms. Karen Beresford from the Director of Operations, also from Squamish Helping Hands. Today, I'm here to talk about the Emergency Treatment Fund that is a grant available through Health Canada. So the objective of my presentation today is to seek council direction to apply for the Health Canada Emergency Treatment Fund, which I'll refer to as ETF, to provide funding for Squamish Helping Hands Society programs, program delivery. So a little bit of background, the ETF is managed by Health Canada and provides time-limited contribution funding to Canadian municipalities and Indigenous communities across Canada to enhance local capacity to address urgent and immediate needs related to substance use and overdoses. As mentioned in that bullet, it is specific for Canadian municipalities and Indigenous communities, but does allow us to work with a third party, such as Squamish Helping Hands Society, to deliver those essential services related to substance use and overdoses. The ETF itself can fund projects up to $2 million per fiscal year per organization. These projects can be up to 12 months in length, and for this current funding cycle, the projects must happen from April 1st, 2026 and end no later than March 31st, 2027. The application window opened on October 4th, and the deadline to apply is November 4th. Due to job action occurring at the district, we originally did not feel that we would be able to prioritize this. However, with further discussion with Squamish Helping Hands Society, we've decided to try and see if we can hit this deadline of November 4th, and that's why we're coming to you today for this approval. The district has previously supported Squamish Helping Hands in the disbursement of a multi-year grant from UBCM for the Downtown Squamish Neighborhood Resilience Initiative. So this isn't an unfamiliar process to us to have a flow-through agreement in place with Squamish Helping Hands. So the proposed project scope, which both my colleagues from Squamish Helping Hands can further elaborate on if there's any questions. The hope is to secure $1.489 million for that 2026 to 2027 period. This will allow Squamish Helping Hands to continue and expand upon existing essential health and harm reduction programming for underserved and unhoused populations in Squamish. This proposal will help maintain the operations that are already in place for the Open Door Health Clinic that's operating out of Under One Roof. It will extend the overdose prevention site service hours and ultimately enhance some of those wraparound outreach supports through this funding opportunity. So if we were to obtain council endorsement on this, our next steps would be for Squamish Helping Hands to complete the grant writing by end of day tomorrow. Thankfully, they've got a grant writer who is currently working on this and hoping to get us the fulsome proposal by end of day tomorrow. That grant will subsequently undergo internal review, so we will be seeking CFO and CAO approval as the grant is ultimately submitted by the district, and submit this by November 4th. The district may, if successfully, if approved as a for the grant contribution, we could potentially see ourselves entering into a flow-through agreement with Squamish Helping Hands Society in alignment with our community agreements policy. However, that will be determined. We recently got word from the ETF team that if we are determined or if we are deemed a successful applicant, they would identify a Health Canada advisor who would determine what that contribution agreement would look like. There is a possibility that the contribution would actually just go directly to a third party, so there might not be a need for a flow-through agreement, but that's something that we would look into if we were successful. That concludes the end of my presentation, and I've just got the recommendation up for Council's consideration. So the recommendation reads that Council directs staff to apply for Health Canada's Emergency Treatment Fund in conjunction with Squamish Helping Hands Society for projects up to $2 million per fiscal year, contingent on both CAO and CFO review prior to the application submission on November 4th. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the presentation. Council, questions at this time? Go ahead, Councillor Greenlaw.
Thanks. Through the chair, with a lot of grant applications, apologies if I missed this, but with a lot of grants, there's like a monetary ask of the district themselves in order to get to it. And I was just, in order to be successful in their application, I was just wondering if there is any financial impact to our bottom line.
Thank you for the question. Through the chair, at this time, there's no anticipated financial impact to the district. Our goal is to keep this as clean as possible, where it's really money that will be allocated directly to Squamish Helping Hands. So either through the contribution agreement that we would enter with Health Canada directly or through a flow-through agreement.
Pascal, I can answer a little more specifically.
Sure, yeah. Come on up.
Never mind. Thanks, Lauren, and that's a great question. And there is in the application reference to other partnerships. And so they will be named in the application, District of Squamish being one, VCH being one, and Community Action Initiative being one. We also need to name cash donations that will be going towards our society and in-kind donations. So these are all things that will be in the application, but there is no monetary requirement from the district.
So just to get extra clarity, that's helpful. The contributions already made through all the various ways are what will be considered in it. There was not an additional layer of, some percentage contribution of the overall funds or anything like that. Okay.
We already work together.
Yep. Great. Thank you very much for that. Councillor Greenlaw, did you have an additional question before I move on? Okay. Councillor Pettingill.
Yeah, I recognize we may not have the immediate answer to this, but we've been doing a lot of lobbying of the province for support in terms of.
Councillor Pettingill, your audio is rough. Do you mind just turning your camera off, perhaps, and trying again? Oh,
yeah.
Yep. Go ahead.
Okay, apologize, and sorry if we may not have the answer in the room. But we've been doing a lot of lobbying and advocacy to the province for more supports in terms of homelessness and housing and supporting vulnerable people and so on. And my understanding is that the federal government typically provides a large bucket of healthcare funding to the province, and the province is meant to manage all this programming, which is why we've been lobbying the province. This almost seems like we're going direct to the federal government, which in our current circumstance maybe makes sense. But should we also be doing a lot more, like, is this unusual, or should we be doing a lot more active lobbying of the federal government in terms of some of these changes?
That's a great question. Now, this fund did open last year. So secretly, not secretly, Pascal and I have been waiting for it to open. And I will say Patrick Weller contacted us specifically to apply for this. So I think the federal government are recognizing how important this funding is to our local community. The second part of that question about the province, I don't think this is unusual. I think this is a federal call that goes every year. How this would line up with our provincial asks, it's directly aligned with those asks. So again, this is all work we're already doing. And so if we were also to receive provincial funding, we would just be doing more of the same work. There's no pilot projects in this. There's no programming we're not already doing. This is all what we're already doing.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Yeah, thank you for the question, Councillor Pettingill. And I think that the answer from my side is likely yes and to every source of funding and support that we can find on this topic. And in the spirit of that, I would like to move the recommendation If it's seconded, I'll speak to it. Thank you. Seconded by Councillor Hamilton. Thank you for bringing this forward, and also for finding the capacity in a very limited capacity time for our organization to chase this funding opportunity. I think investments in this area, both from the municipal perspective, from the federal provincial perspective, is incredibly important. And I hope that we can build a strong case for both the need in the community and the need for the appropriateness of the federal government to layer onto that with this funding source, given the fruitful partnerships that we already have working in this area. So thank you so much for your work on this to date, and I hope that this will lead to a successful application. So thank you very much. Other comments on this? Councillor French, go ahead, and then I'll go to you, Councillor Stoner.
Thanks, Mayor Herford. I too am supportive of this and happy that you've found a way to get this application in. If for only one thing, in the possibility of increasing the overdose prevention site hours. I hear regularly from downtown residents who are not happy with their own safety and security concerns. And I've heard over and over again from residents that a big chunk of the disruption they experience in their neighborhood is when the OPS is closed. So if that building can be open for more hours, it's going to be a good thing, and it's going to have a positive impact for everybody, including the downtown residents who are struggling with their safety and security concerns. So I fully support this application and I hope we get it.
Thank you. Councillor Stoner, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, the chair. Also happy to support the motion on the floor. Thanks to staff at Helping Hands and within the district for pursuing this when capacity is short across both organizations, but recognizing how important it is to bring all resources possible to the challenge that we're facing in our community. On the overdose crisis, the toxic drug supply crisis. I'm grateful to hear, Ms. Pine, that there actually aren't any pilot projects in this application. As much as pilot projects are amazing, there's nothing more heartbreaking than spending a year and a half building up an amazing pilot project to only have to sunset it because we only have 2 years of funding. And I know that you know that all too well. And so I'm grateful to see that this is continuing to support tried true methods of serving our most vulnerable portions of our population and continuing to do that work in a really good way. I'm so grateful that the application is going in. I got my fingers and toes crossed that the feds will show up in a good way.
Thank you very much. I've got Councillor Greenlaw, and just a note for those participating remotely, we're having some challenge with both audios. We can hear it, but it is sounds otherworldly, so we'll work to resolve that as we go forward. Go ahead, Councillor Greenlaw.
Yeah, thanks to the chair. I just wanted to thank you all for the hard work, and I kind of just feel like any money that goes to your organization is money that's well spent. So I'm happy to support this. And I also think it's really important to, as Councillor French was communicating, extend the hours of the OPS as much as possible. I think that's a really important directive and a really important direction we need to go into. So I'm happy to, happy to support this. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Pettingill, I see your hand. Is that a legacy hand or do you have additional comment?
It's an additional comment.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, happy to support this. I think I also heard that this is meant to support some outreach programming, which in terms of helping folks who are struggling find a way to the supports they need and to sort of a better future for themselves and the community, I think is very vulnerable. And I think that's a piece not to dismiss at all. It seems like a very important piece of this as well. It has been challenging for us to get funding in this area, and so I'm glad the feds are coming to the table in this way. And I know Helping Hands will put it to good use, and so I look forward to the success of this grant. Thank you.
Thank you. And with that, I'll call the question. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. I just have a quick process question from a budget perspective. So we have this, will this grant application will we see this sort of inserted into our budgeting in planning for its arrival, or is this something that we would handle in an amendment, or just where does this dovetail in with our processes?
Yeah, thank you for the question. Heather Boxer, General Manager of Financial IT and Procurement Services. So it really depends on the nature of the grant. We haven't actually gotten all of those pieces. If there's a liability to the district, we will want to put it on the financial plan. It's revenue and expense, so net neutral. However, if it's a flow through with no liability to the district, then we can actually flow it right through what is the balance sheet, so the statement of financial position. So that requires no financial plan amendment.
Okay, and that's part of the assessment that'll be done in the coming days?
Correct. We don't have that information at this point in time.
Okay, thank you very much. So council, I'd be looking for a motion to close. Moved by Councillor Hamilton, second by Councillor Greenlaw. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much. So we'll recess the meeting or reconvene in the closed.